Does your dog eavesdrop on you? Does your dog understand language? Does your dog understand your language? There's many dog owners that are out there that we're going to probably surprise with this. But about 2 weeks ago, there was a study about dogs eavesdropping on their owners. We're going to analyze that study today on the Data Show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Show. I'm Chris Greco, your host. And what we're going to do is, because this is a relatively new year, it's 2026, well, we're going to try a format here that, that focuses on the analysis of a data study. And in the last week or so, there's been a lot of media attention to a study that was done out of Hungary that talks about dogs being able to eavesdrop on their owners. I mean, that's the way the media put it. And I did some research on this study, and I wanted to analyze the study. And also, I'm trying to write a book on the analysis of studies. So I'm going to try to use all these different aspects of data analysis and see if we can make this work. So first thing we're going to talk about is the data analysis of a study. And we're going to cover the following things just to make sure that we have them all. The hypothesis, in other words, a question that the study is trying to answer. And interestingly enough, hypotheses are really statements. They're not questions. They're made from questions. So a question on a study might be, do cigarettes cause cancer? And the hypothesis would be, the null hypothesis, that which you're trying to prove or not disprove or reject or not reject, is cigarettes cause cancer, right? Do cigarettes cause cancer? Question, cigarettes cause cancer, hypothesis. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. The sampling method, very, very important. And I think this is something that we need to talk about in length. And maybe I'll do an entire video on this. But the sampling method is so important. I cannot emphasize how important it is. And I've talked about this in other videos, but we'll talk about the sampling method and how that all works. Any statistical tests that are done, sometimes what happens is you can talk about the verity, the truthfulness, the validity of a study, even without getting to the statistical tests, the t-test and the signed rank tests, the Wilcoxon signed rank tests, all the different tests that they have. And they make it seem like, they're really doing a lot of statistical testing to try to figure out the statistical significance of the finding. But the bottom line is are statistical tests really necessary if the sampling is not what you want? If the sampling does not make a valid test, the statistical tests aren't going to help that. Whether or not the statistical tests are parametric or non-parametric, and again, we may do an entire video on this. Parametric meaning that they follow a curve, they follow the standard curve. Non-parametric means they don't. You can't tell if they do or if they don't, and we may cover that, we may not cover that. And robust, non-robust. Robust meaning median. A median measurement does not take into consideration, is not affected by highs or lows, which makes it very robust, right? Not robust means mean, right? Because mean is very affected by ultra highs and ultra lows. And best the way to do that is say, what's the median of 1, 2, 3, 4, 50,000, right? It's 3. What's the median? What's the mean of 1, 2, 3, 4, 50,000? It's going to be much more than 3. So there we have, that high of 50,000 really kicks that mean all over the place. And then confounding factors. The confounding factors are areas that are brought up that are not brought up in the study that could in fact limit that study, or questions that are brought up that show that the study was not a fair study, was not without its biases. And we may discuss that in that today. And then any limitations. Most studies will list limitations as to what, each one does, that type of thing. And transparent studies will list those. So that's pretty important. And then a summary and what they call a score. I'm trying to figure out how to score studies, to show that they're either, valid, not valid. And it's not that the studies were done poorly. It's that parts of it, the methodology may have been really solid, but getting the samples, those types of things may have had its issues. And that's pretty much it with that. Now, what we're going to do is talk about the actual study. So the study today we're going to talk about is dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels learn new labels by overhearing, like 1.5-year-old infants. Okay, now this could be construed as a hypothesis. Dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels learn new labels by overhearing. Now, the like 1.5-year-old infants, comparing dogs to infants. I don't like that. I don't like, you have an animal and you're comparing it to an infant. You're comparing it to a human being. I'm sorry, but those are two different species. You cannot and should not compare one to the other, or attempting to do that. But, I'm sure that there are biologists or, zoologists or whatever else that will dispute that. And that's fine. That's my opinion. And all opinions on this show are my opinions. They're not to be construed as something that, generalization, that type of thing. So don't take it like that. So this is this is from, and all of them, all the texts except for indicated, and I'll indicate them as a footnote, are taken from this study. So if you want to take a look at this study, please do. It's the methodology is some of the most specific methodology I think I've ever seen. It's just absolutely astronomical. I mean, the way that they went about the method by which they did this was just amazing. So now let's talk about so there's the hypothesis there, right? So now we have this. This is from the study. The gifted word learner, GWL dogs, that participated in the study were part of a group of dogs that have previously proven their knowledge of object labels, and this 25 is a footnote from the original study, and regularly participate in object label learning studies. Okay, let's take a look at this one thing. Dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels. So what they do is, by saying this, dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels. The way the media came out, and I'll put some media shots here at the end here. The way that they addressed it was dogs, period, like any type of dog. Well, that is just not true. And it's a misrepresentation of the study. And if I were the study people, I would have said something like, no, it's not every dog. And it's not certainly, any dog. It's not every dog. It's not any dog. It's a specific set of dogs. Specific set of dogs. So that we have to take a look at and say, dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels. That is your population of dogs that you're going to sample from. So right there, we talk about the gifted word learner dogs. These are GWL dogs. They are specific dogs that have participated in studies and have proven their knowledge of object labels. All of this means that you cannot take this study and apply it to every dog. In fact, you can't apply it to many dogs. In fact, you can only apply it to some dogs, these specific gifted word learner dogs, period. That's it. So, this is something that is very, very important. The sampling is done from a specific population, not from dogs in general, period. So this is from the study again. Our goal in this experiment, we want to see if by only observing an interaction between two people, gifted dogs can pick up the name of a new toy. So this is very important. That's the goal. So let's go back to the right. Dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels learn new labels by overhearing. I don't like that like 1.5-year-old, but whatever. Then it goes back to the goal. In this experiment, we want to see if by only observing an interaction between two people, gifted dogs, not all dogs, not even some dogs, gifted dogs can pick up the name of a new toy. Well, let's go back again. It doesn't say that. It says dogs with a large vocabulary of object labels learn new labels by overhearing. Well, okay. Name of a new toy. In other words, you have to take a look at the goal. You have to take a look at the title. You have to take a look at all these things and see, okay, is that really what they want to do? So they had two experiments, right? Experiment 1, experiment 2. And they had two parts to each of these. Experiment 1A, experiment 1B, experiment 2, So the same 10 GWL dogs. Let me make something very clear here. These are 10 dogs. Now, I can look up, how many dogs are pets in the U.S., right? I can try to take a look at that. And, the World Animal Foundation has something, pet ownership statistics, whatever they're going to have there. And so 94 million U.S. households own a pet, right? This is according to worldanimalfoundation.org, right? Dogs dominated 68 million homes. So this is the U.S. This is the U.S. So 68 million homes. So 94 million households own a pet. 68 million of those are dogs. This is extremely important to understand. Out of those 68 million, you're taking 10, right? So and they're saying, well, they were very specific in the title, Chris. Yes, they were, and they were very specific in the goal. So it's all they did was they took GWL dogs. Okay, fine. Participated in 1A, 1B, and we're not going to go into those experiments because right now I'm hitting sampling here at this point in time. The dog's mean age was 4.3 years plus or minus 1A. The sample included 7 border collies, 1 Labrador Retriever, 1 mini Australian Shepherd, and 1 Blue Heeler Australian Shepherd mix. So you have 7 border collies. 7 border collies. Now, I don't know what you know about border collies, but border collies are really smart dogs. I mean, they are very, very smart dogs. They use them to herd sheep. I mean, these are not dumb dogs. You can't, the dogs themselves will herd sheep. I mean, it's just pretty amazing. So at the time of the test, the dog's mean estimated vocabulary size was 84 object labels. You notice they don't say words. They say 84 object labels. Okay. So just keep that in mind. We're going to continue this. So they had experiment 1A, which was address condition. The aim of the AC was to examine whether under familiar learning conditions, in other words, in their homes, right, with their masters, GWL, I shouldn't say that, in their homes with their owners. Okay. GWL dogs are able to acquire the labels of 2 new toys with the exposure procedure described in general method section, which there's a PDF that you can get that will have every single thing that you want in there. And that was at the beginning. In fact, let me show it to you one more time. That was here. Okay. So when you go in here, when you go in Science Magazine and you go in this areas, whatever else, there's a PDF that'll show all the different testing. So that's pretty amazing. All right. Experiment 1D, overhearing condition. The aim of the OC was to examine whether GWL dogs can learn the labels of new toys by passively overhearing an interaction between their owners. So that's interesting, right? So overhearing condition. All right. So again, we're not going to go into the experiments. If you want to do that on your own, go for it. That type of thing. This is strictly about the different data analysis aspects we're talking about. Experiment 2. The subjects of this experiment were 10 border collies. Okay, so let's take a look at this. 10 border collies. Okay, they're all the same breed. They're all the same dog breed, folks. So I think, and that's important. So let's just take a look. I'm just going to take a look real quick. How many border collies are pets in the U.S.? I just want to see if I can come up with a number. Border collies. So let's just see this real quick. Profile, border beekeeper information and cost. There's a lot of cost there. I don't see anything that says, what it is. How many border collies are left in the world? Whatever. Highest numbers are in the United States. BorderCollieHub.com. So that's what I'm looking at. Collie population, global estimates, population factor influence, breeding changes, health issues, blah, blah, blah. It's okay. So there's nothing in here that talks about how many border collies there are in the United States. There we go. They exist worldwide. There are approximately 800,000 to 1 million border collies globally. United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada have the highest border collie populations. These countries value them as working and companion dogs. But there are approximately 800,000 to 1 million border collies. Okay. So 800,000 to 1 million border collies, of which there are 10. Right. For GWL, I don't know how many GWL dogs there are. I mean, I don't know how many. I guess I could, I could look that up. So how many GWL dogs exist? Now, and they had to ask their owners. They had to do all kind of things. They had rare phenomenon. Found 41 dogs around 9 different countries that could perform better than the chance vocabulary assessment test. So this is in Science Alert. So this is, and then it says Psychology Today. What makes a dog a gifted learner, gifted word learner? So it talks about that, but there's nothing in here that talks about where they are, So they said they found 41 dogs, whatever that means. So out of the 41, they got 10, but they're all border collies for this one experiment. Can you see what I'm talking about here? A random sample, and I think this is really, really important. A random sample means that they are equally, they have an equal chance of being selected, okay? They have an equal chance of being selected. Every object has an equal chance of being selected. Okay, so, they had 41 dogs. Did they have an equal chance of being selected? Well, if you take a look at the methodology, and you can get that yourself, they asked the owner if they would like to be involved in the study. If they said no, then that was it. So they really didn't have an equal chance of being selected. It was based on a lot of self-reporting. It was based on a lot of different aspects that go along with that. So, I mean, it's very interesting from the standpoint of what we're talking about here. So 10 border collies, 2 additional dogs participated in the study but were excluded as they did not complete the procedure. One of them didn't, or because video data they provided was of low visual quality. One of those. These dogs were selected based on their extensive training experience. All dogs regularly participated in dog sports, rally obedience, whatever, and knew the verbal cues of between 20 to 50 actions. So again, what we want to talk about is the sampling of this thing. Yes, I am, the way they present it in the study, which was very transparent, was GWL dogs. And again, the methodology was absolutely fantastic. The way they did things and the way they have things, whatever else. But there's one thing after they're all done with this, going out and grabbing the toy and doing whatever. The one thing that they failed to mention, and this is just me, so I'm not gonna do anything, but what color was the toy? In other words, this to me is very, very important. Is what color was the toy? In other words, if they're talking about a toy and the toy is blue, and they put that toy out with all the other toys, they spread them out and do whatever in another room. What says that the dog doesn't go for the blue toy? In other words, you can talk about armadillos and you can talk about, whether it's a rabbit or an acorn or whatever it is. But what says that the dog doesn't take a look at the toy and say, that toy is blue. in other words, can distinguish colors because of their sight, and then they go and they pick out the blue toy. They should have had a black and white toy for every toy. This way, the color would not have been what I call a confounding factor. And this confounding factor is really, really, really important. Is, when we talk about this and we talk about these areas, confounding factors are a big part of that. Big part of that. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting from that standpoint. Okay, so we've covered this study, and again, you can go out there and you can get the real, like I said, the methodology is very, very, very detailed, and I'm not going to do that in this show. And the statistical tests, they did a binomial, they did a Wilcoxon sign rank test, they did a chi-square, they did a lot of different tests on this. But the tests, as I am stating here, you can be a statistical wizard, but if you do not have a good sampling, then you can do as many tests as you want, but it really doesn't make any difference. Let's take a look at the media reaction and how this clickbait is thrown out there so people actually take a look at it. The behavior is also similar to some 18-month-old children pick up new words, as any parent who has uttered a curse word when they thought their toddler was out of earshot, only to hear it repeated back to them later, can attest. This means the dog have socio-cognitive skills that are functionally parallel to human 18-month-olds, the researchers write in their paper. And this was from the SmithsonianMag.com. To write that type of thing in a study, to me, is borderline misrepresentation. And you can sit there and you can say, but Chris, there are scientific studies. You cannot compare a dog to a human. A dog is not a human. A dog is nowhere near a human. A dog is a dog. A human is a human. Now, people will sit back and they'll say, but I've owned a dog for years and they understand me. And I think dogs are extremely empathetic. I think they feel a lot more from their owners than we think that they do. I mean, if an owner is sad, they're sad. If an owner is happy, they're happy. Excitement is if their owner is excited, they're excited. I mean, there's a lot of empathetic reaction, sympathetic reaction, whatever you want to call it. So to sit there and say that dogs have socio-cognitive skills, yeah, for a dog, but don't compare them to an 18-month-old children, and don't ever compare them to humans. A dog cannot be president of the United States. A dog cannot be congressional representative. Now, I know that some people might say, maybe they would be better, but let's get away from that for a second and talk about dogs cannot be elected to office. They can't. They can't make those functional aspects. They don't have opposing thumbs. There's a lot of things about a dog, right? Just bear with me on this. This is from Scientific American. Most dog owners are aware that their pooch is smart enough to know a few choice words. Walkies, for instance, or perhaps most likely time for dinner. Some particularly, it's funny because they say time for dinner, but what do owners do while they're having dinner? They open up a packet, they open up a can, they open up the sound is something that automatically, I mean, Pavlov, think of Pavlov's dogs. I mean, they salivate whenever they hear a sound. That is what dogs do, right? Some particularly intelligent canines can identify more than 100 words. Doubtful, but okay. And incredibly, a few genus doggies may be able to learn words not by being taught, but purely by eavesdropping on human conversations. Again, this is like, some dogs learn new words just like toddlers do. Yeah, fine. I think it's colors, but okay. Here's one from MSN. In fact, according to the esteemed journal Science, a study of 10 breeds, false. This is directly out of MSN.com. False. It wasn't 10 breeds. It was not 10 breeds. Including but not limited to border collies and Labrador retrievers, suggests that those dogs participating in the study group were able to listen in and actually recall specific words during a conversation between their owner and another individual. And again, confounding factors being involved in this are colors. Give them a blue toy, you throw the blue toy in the midst of other colors, they pick out the blue toy. I mean, it's interesting that the statistical testing, in some cases, it was 7 out of 10. better than average, right? But I mean, the bottom line is, were they responding to the words or were they responding to the colors? So, I mean, this is what we have, and this is the situation where we talk about, data analysis, not data analysis, but analysis of the study itself. And this is something that people tend to forget. They listen to the media, which it's all about clickbait. Some of these articles had dogs that had like their noses, their snouts through the door, like they're listening. Folks, unless they have a listening device on them, they're being empathetic. They're trying to figure out what you want. They're trying to make you happy. Dogs are trying to make their owners happy. They're trying to do those things that the owners think are good. They're trying to get praise. So I think that what's happening here is that this study, not taking anything away from the people in Hungary doing the study, good for them. They got themselves some dogs and whatever else, but they didn't get 10 breeds of dogs. Folks, I mean, even the study shows the listing of dogs. You can see it in the PDF. It shows exactly the breed of dog. There are not 10 breeds there. Not 10 breeds. The most I saw were 4 or 5, but there were 10 dogs. So the one media outlet completely misconstrued what the study was about, or just plain old didn't read the study in detail and just took out what they needed to go and throw it in there. As you can see, we're 800,000 to 1 million border collies, of which they had 10. There are, 68 million dogs, of which they had 10. It may be a great sample from the GWL area, but I couldn't find how many GWL dogs there are. So there may be, if there's 40 dogs and they took 10 of those, that's 1 out of 4. I don't, is that a good sampling? I don't know. So it's that type of thing where you take a look and you have to take a look at the sampling, and you have to take a look at the different aspects within that sampling and figure out exactly what the validity of the study is. Now, if I were to score this study from a GWL perspective, great. From a dog perspective, to say that dogs generally are eavesdropping on their owners. Dogs generally can understand words. Dogs generally can do that. That is totally false. There's put a study out there that takes a random sampling of dogs and has them do the same thing they just did here, and that's a fair judgment. But to sit there and take a bunch of gifted, I mean, it's like the same thing. If you want to go back to humans, the same thing is like saying that a gifted child, that all children can do a certain thing because a gifted child could do that, because a child with above average ability with that one area can do that, then all children can do that. That's totally false, and it's almost misrepresentation. So you have to really be careful about these studies. Take a look, because I didn't go into the detail, and you can still see that there's some real issues if you were trying to generalize this whole thing. So I think that just about does it. But hopefully, those dog owners, hey, say, hey, my dog can understand 100 words. Go for it. Email me. Love to. I'd love to. Email me. Do it. There it is, right there. Email me and tell me your dog's the smartest dog in the whole world. Say, Chris, you're full of poo-poo. My dog is fantastic, and you're, whatever else. And see, that's fine with me. So until next time, I'm going to tell you that you need to check the data and you need to check the study. And we'll continue to do these study analyses as time goes on this show, trying to do 1 per month. So until the next time, remember, check the data. Have a great, great, great week ahead, month ahead. And I will catch you next month on the Data Show.